Immediately invoked function expressions are an important pattern in JavaScript. I've mentioned it briefly during a few of the past topics. Well, now we are going to look at it in more detail. Immediately invoked function expressions are called IIFEs in the JavaScript world. That is the way you pronounce that IIFE that you see at the end there on that title line. IIFE. An IIFE is simply defining a function and then invoking it immediately. We don't wait to call it later. It's defined and invoked at the same time. Let's look at a simple example, and then I will talk about some of the reasons we use IIFEs. All right, I'm going to create a very simple function here. It's basically going to add two numbers and return them is all. So we'll return, let's just do 5 plus 5. Now, if we save this, and I'm going to jump out here and take a look at the console. If we look at the sum variable, what it contains, we see that it contains the function. Now, if we want to invoke that, then we have to add the parens. Now, what if we could define this and then just put the double parens at the end of it here so that we're defining the function and then we're invoking it at the same time? That would mean it's immediately invoked. And this is a function expression. So an immediately invoked function expression. So let's try that. I'll go ahead and put the two quotes after that. Now what is going to be in the sum variable? Is it going to be the function? No, it's going to be the value that's returned if this immediately invokes. So we'll save that. And then let's take a look at sum now. It contains the response or the return value from that function because it was immediately invoked. So this here is an immediately invoked function expression. It does not work for a function declaration. We can't do this type of thing. Let's see, return. We'll just do something like that. I want you to show you what happens if we set up a declaration. So if I save that, uncaught syntax error, unexpected token on line 9. So line 9 doesn't like this. It doesn't know what we're doing here. So it can't be done with a function declaration. Has to be a function expression. So anytime we're immediately invoking something, it is a function expression. Now let me show you type of thing that can be done with this. I'm going to do a sum 10 and I'll set that equal to a function, and we're going to have a parameter there for a number that's passed in, and then inside of here we're going to declare a variable and we'll set that equal to 10 just like that, and then we'll return num plus num1. So that's why we're calling it sum 10. Now what happens if we immediately invoke this? Put parens around that, save it. Let's take a look at sum 10. NaN is telling us it's not a number. What is it telling us that for? Well, we didn't pass a value in for this, and so it's trying to add undefined to 10, says NaN. So let's pass a value in. We'll do 5, save that. Now we get 15 with sum 10. Now, I want to make you aware of something with this variable that I just put in here. There is nothing that can change this variable. Once it's set, it is 10. And it's not just because I used a const to define it. Obviously, a const will prevent that from being reassigned. We'll get a syntax error. But it's also because it's contained in this function. The fact that it's defined in this function means we don't have access to it. No other coder could even address that variable because it's inside the function. All right. So the reason I show this is this helps illustrate the use cases for immediately invoked function expressions. There actually is 2 of those. I'm just going to enter them here. Use cases. 2 that I think are important. One is private data. Okay. This is private data. this can't be changed. It's inside the function. It can't be messed with. It's private. Another use case is to avoid global variables and variable collision. So we are able to run code without declaring global variables when we use an immediately invoked function expression. Now let me illustrate that use case. So I'm going to copy in some code here. I'll just paste it below these use cases. There we go. Title 2. I'm query selector title 2. I'm grabbing, if we look at the HTML file, I'm grabbing this div right here that has the immediately invoked function expression title line. All right, we're grabbing that. Then we're adding event listeners to it. One is for mouse over, one's for mouse out. In both cases, all it does is change the cursor and change it back. And then we have a click event that simply logs to the console the inner text of this. All right. So if we save that, we come out here. Notice my cursor changes as I go over that. When I click, it puts the information, the inner HTML from that DOM element on the console. Now we've declared a variable here to do that, to grab this div and to be able to use it. But let's put a function around this. And let's start by declaring a variable. I'm going to change this in a moment, but we're going to start this way. Let's say init. It's an initialize function. And let me just put all of this. I'm going to indent it so that it can be inside these curly braces, formatted a little bit for us. And then here's the closing curly brace for that function. Now we have an init function. Now obviously if we save this, we no longer have the functionality here because it hasn't been invoked. We did not call that function. Well, we know that we can immediately invoke that by doing this kind of thing. So I add the parens at the end there. Now let's see if we've got that functionality. I come up, the cursor changes, I click on it. Yes, we've got it. So we were able to immediately invoke that. But we still have a variable here. Well, we're not capturing anything in this variable. There's nothing that we're returning from this function that we need to have the variable for. Let's just remove that variable. And let's see if that works. We save it. What do we get? A syntax error. Function statement requires a function name. So what it's telling us, what that syntax error is telling us, is that this is a function statement. It's expecting a function name right after it. It's expecting a function declaration because it sees the function keyword as first. Well, let's turn this into an expression. And the way we can do that is simply put parentheses around it. Now, I usually like to put my parentheses around the function and then have the parens to invoke it right after that. But there are many people that prefer to do it this way. They both work. It doesn't matter which way you choose to do it. They both work. So now let's save this. We no longer get the syntax error. I come up. I get the cursor changing, I click on it, I see it down in the console. So now we have code that's executing inside a function, and we didn't have to declare a variable to have that happen. This variable is now inside the function, doesn't pollute the global space, so we avoid variable collisions, meaning that someone else working on the project or some code we brought in was using the same variable name, and those two variables collide. The last one to be declared or last one to receive a value is the one that takes precedence. So we avoid those collisions and we avoid global variables. Now we can also have private data. Obviously no one can access this variable, but this DOM element's available outside of this function. They would just need to select it. But I can declare a variable here, set it equal to something, just punctuation of some sort. Now this cannot be accessed. From here on out, the punctuation is going to be an exclamation point. Well, we could also set up a function inside of this function and return it outside the function that would allow us to change this. And then we govern how that private data is changed, which is a very common pattern. In fact, this is a pattern that's used in the traditional module pattern, which we'll talk about when we deal with modules in this course. And as I mentioned with closures, you're going to be looking at that, and you're going to be looking at immediately invoked function expressions when we deal with the traditional module pattern. So it's a great pattern to learn to apply these concepts. But this punctuation mark is private. If I save this, come out, click on it, now we're seeing the punctuation mark there. So that is immediately invoked function expressions. Now, what I'd like to do in the next topics, we're going to look at a few of the pieces of code we used in past topics where I may have mentioned that this could be enhanced with immediately invoked function expression. We'll look at how we can enhance those. We'll look at the changes we need to make to use an IIFE. All right, so let's move on to the next topic.